Rebecca Cohen.
And I'm Maya Garance.
And this is The Sauce, the politics and pop culture podcast where we drink cocktails and ruin the stuff you love.
And today we're going to I don't know that we're going to ruin these movies. Don't they ruin themselves? We're going to ruin one word title movies about contagious disease.
Yes, you sound quiet to me.
Oh no, should I lean in? Does
Uh,
that help?
yeah, that does seem to help. You sound
Okay,
kind of quiet when you're away
very
from
good.
it. Plus, we can
Okay.
see you better when you lean in.
Well, yes.
And, it's the feminist thing to do.
Right. That's right. We're all leaning in.
One must lean in.
So we're going to talk about these movies with one word titles that are about pandemics. And we're going to do it with a really specific purpose because we are on a longer deep dive through the history of movies about communicable diseases. But we feel like if we start with these, we can sort of lay out the themes that we're going to be seeing again and again in our deeper dive.
Exactly. So, yes, we'll get into that, all that stuff. We're going to look at three movies: Outbreak, Contagion, and Pandemic. No, and
Not
Quarantine.
pandemic,
Outbreak,
quarantine.
Contagion, and Quarantine.
That's right.
Sorry. And that will be a lot of fun. Before we do that, Maya, tell me now, what are you drinking? And also, you're in the middle of a cross country drive. How are you?
I'm in the
Where are
middle of
you?
it. I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas, the home of the Clinton Presidential Library. I drove from Charlotte, North Carolina to Little Rock. Tomorrow, I'm going to drive from Little Rock all the way to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then I'm going to drive from Albuquerque all the way home. I was packing up all my equipment from my scuttled residency in Charlotte.
Mhm.
The flight out, I thought I might as well share it because I think people might be interested. The flight out was crazy. Like LAX was so empty.
Yeah.
It was fucking spooky as shit. It was like
It was like one of those movies where everybody's died from a disease and you're the only person left.
you're the only yes, actually. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it was like. Um Everybody who worked in the LA airport was wearing masks. No one in Charlotte airport was wearing masks. On the plane itself, there was only one person per row, and there wasn't even like one person in every row. Like it was
Yeah.
actually the flight of my dreams.
Yeah. Well,
I was wearing an N95 mask with like a mask over it with like a bandana over that and glasses and a hat so that I could just be
you were like the invisible
protected.
man. Like
I
you
looked
had to
exactly like
cover
the Invisible
every
Man.
yeah, cover
I
every
looked
bit of skin.
exactly like the Invisible Man. Um, and I've been washing my hands and I'm staying at an Airbnb because I figured that there's less traffic in an Airbnb than at a hotel. And hotels have the kind of canned air. And I have unopened containers of Clorox wipes. So I'm just wiping. I brought my own cases so that I could like put it like I've tried to be very careful in doing this trip is what I'm trying to
That's
say.
understandable as you don't want to spread anything or bring anything back home.
I do not. I do not. And I'm drinking a what would be called, if I'm being kind about it, a lime rum Ricky. Uh,
Okay.
but it's what I can manage on the road.
So
But it's
it's
actually quite tasty.
rum, lime, and what?
Rum, lime, sugar, soda water.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
It's all right. I'm surprised at how well it turned out actually. As I was making it, I was pretty grumpy, but
I'm
it's actually quite good.
I'm impressed. That's resourceful in my opinion. You've done
Oh
well.
my
You're
god.
on the road.
Wait,
What?
I just have to tell you this really quick story because I am in the South right now.
Okay.
So, uh my brother lives in the South in Alabama. I've
Hmm.
spoken of this before. And he was telling me that it's maddening because and he says like it's so fucking southern. Like when you go to the supermarket, 90% of the women are wearing masks and 90% of the men are not wearing masks. He's
Really?
like it is so like southern sexism, like they are not going to be put out by anything. Like why should they have to do anything that's going to inconvenience them? And like it was really interesting because on the road there was construction and there was this big sign being like, drive carefully. We're all in this together. Like, hey
Aw.
guys, there are working humans. Like, please don't drive like assholes. It's like, yeah, how dare you make me want to wear a mask? God.
People, yeah, I mean, we talked about this in our last episode that I'm sorry I still haven't posted the audio, the actual podcast. I just haven't had a chance. It's hard for me lately to find time to edit because I have all these other important things to do, like you know, sit around my house and find. Oh, I found a new website about cocktails, or you can put all of the things you have in your bar. You enter, and then it tells you what cocktails you can make.
Oh my
It's
God, how many
amazing.
hours did you lose to that website?
I don't count. I would not be able to go on with my life if I counted things like that, you know? You just
So
let it happen.
how are you doing and what are you drinking?
Well, I'm drinking wine, red wine. I believe it's a California Pinot Noir from my
Mm.
one of my wine clubs. But I think at this
Mm.
point I'll just say my wine club. It's the one I've settled on. It's a Sonoma Pinot
Mm.
Noir, I'm told.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I'm fine. This shirt was $7. Again, if
I've noticed that you're continuing.
yes,
Everybody, go follow Rebecca on Instagram at GynoStar. It has become a fashion blog for her thrifty achievements.
thank you. I'm trying to not make it strictly a fashion blog, but I just like I'm not going anywhere. So there's nothing else to post. I'll think of something, and I'm not baking bread. Like, what else could I do? But yeah, this shirt was $7. I'm hanging out. It's fine. And I am drinking wine and just trying to take it one day at a time because there's it's like this
Yeah.
weird stasis, you know?
Yeah. And I think people are also like turning a corner where we're getting to the place where like, I don't know how much longer I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely went from this is fine. I like being home anyway to like okay, I can do this for some time, but I'm not sure how long and
I'm not
whatever.
sure I want to.
Not sure I
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah. So it's nice to have this little road trip, although it was heartbreaking to pack up my studio and mourn
Yeah.
for all I lost, but it's all right. I don't know. One thing that I've been finding hilarious that I
Mhm.
really wanted to share with our listeners is we've been trying to piss people off for so long, Rebecca. We've been
Mhm.
trying to go after Bernie bros and Chapo douchebags and incels, but finally we pissed off a group of people. Finally.
It's true. We really made ourselves some enemies. Now,
Finally.
tell me, Maya, how did you come across this? Was it that they had linked to our website and you followed to
Okay,
see
so
who
every
linked?
once in a while, I check the stats on our WordPress page and it
Sure.
tells you where it's referred from.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it was referred from Reddit. And I was like,
Uh-oh.
finally, finally, the
Right.
incels are finally like, we've made some incel enemies. They're going to come after us. I mean, this is the dream. Like, we're
Right.
finally
It's
living the
why we've been
dream.
doing this entire
This
time.
whole time, it's just to get the attention of incels.
Mostly, at least, yeah.
So I clicked on the Reddit link
Mm-hmm.
and it went to an Adam Driver fan Reddit. And then we got hate mail from an Adam Driver fan. And I've
Yeah.
noticed that the Adam Driver episode has been getting a lot of listens. And for me, I personally think it's mostly because like we are trying to answer a very important mystery of the universe, which is like, why Adam Driver? Like, why?
What's
Why?
going, yeah, what's the appeal? What magic is he wielding that somehow we are immune to?
How did he become like the Dustin Hoffman of our generation? We'll be calling back to that a little later in this episode. Um, and and so we said some things that I think were all extremely true. I think everybody should listen to that episode.
Yes.
But we have pissed off the Adam Driver fangirls.
Yeah. Were they all girls? Do we know that? I mean, I guess we could probably conclude they are. Like, they're. I don't
We
want to
only got
disparage any men that are spending their
angry
time.
messages from girls.
Fair
We
enough.
only got angry messages from girls. We haven't gotten angry messages from boys, but we got a message on Facebook. This was like these people are going out of their way.
Yeah, no, they we really angered them by noting some of the flaws, and that's obviously a very subjective term, but
Some of
noting
the
some of the
physical characteristics.
physical characteristics that are not traditionally considered to be ideal, platonic
But
beauty in
also,
our
we bring
society.
them up because they neutralize what would otherwise be like straight, like they neutralize like straight assholeness, like the straight, glorious assholeness. They sort of cut it a little bit, these physical
Right. I
characteristics.
mean, that was sort of our ultimate conclusion, was that
Yeah.
he has a vulnerability to him because he's unconventional looking, and
Yeah.
that makes it difficult to not sympathize with any character he plays, and then how that can be problematic when he's playing a character who actually is kind of
It's
terrible.
like, yeah.
It
Yeah.
can also be
So
wonderful, but like the point being, they took a lot of issue with us
a lot
mentioning
of
him having
offense.
an
Yeah.
overbite. Like they really did not
Yeah.
care for that.
Yeah, they got really angry that we are talking about what his teeth do to his overall performance. So we finally made some enemies,
I
Rebecca.
know. I feel like I feel proud of that. It does feel like having staked a claim on a certain territory of the map, but it also feels kind of like definitely punching down. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
they're not. I have no issue with Adam Driver or his devoted fans.
Not at
Not
all.
really.
No, we're just trying to like discuss what he means in the social imaginary. And it
Exactly.
might not be entirely what they want to hear, but we have nothing
Exactly.
against their desire for him.
It's nothing personal. We're
No.
just analysts.
It's just business, guys.
Okay. I'm glad we got that out of the way. It is really something to have complete strangers be so angry at you, but that's the
Oh
life we
yeah, but
lead.
you're used to that.
Well,
You're
yeah,
used to that. I mean,
not but not usually nice people like Adam Driver fan. Anyway, real quickly before we continue and get on with the meat of our show, I just want to thank our patrons, the members of our Patreon in
oh,
general. You all have been so great, and you're allowing us to do things like rent movies because some
yeah.
of these movies we're watching are not available for free. And, you know, we are actually starting to use some of the funds to do our research so we can have more better shows. And of
And
course,
to also plan
yeah,
our very exciting plans for 2020 once we're allowed to leave our fucking houses.
yeah,
Oh God.
2021, you mean?
No, no.
We'll see when it happens. We'll do it.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
So you ready to get into
Let's do
these
it.
movies? Let's do it. Okay. So we have three movies that we decided to focus on for our first foray into the world of movies about pandemics, movies about contagious disease. And I want to start with the 1995 movie Outbreak. Well,
Now,
also, it's also chronologically the first one of the three.
yes, and I think it's extremely interesting because, and we'll get into this more deeply, and we're going to talk about Outbreak first. But when we watch these movies, Rebecca thought Outbreak was going to be what Contagion ended up being. And when I started watching Contagion, I thought it was going to be what Outbreak ended up being. So let's start with what did you think Outbreak was supposed to be, Rebecca? Like you thought it
Okay,
was supposed like
so I didn't know that much about it, but I remembered the ads for it when it came out, and I knew it had this like crazy all-star cast. Like a whole
oh
bunch of
yeah,
prestigious actors were in it, and it was Dustin Hoffman, Rene Russo, uh, Donald Sutherland, Morgan Freeman, and more people. So
Kevin
Kevin
Spacey,
Spacey,
Cuba Gooding Jr. I mean, come on.
everybody in it is somebody, and I don't know. I had the impression that it would be a serious kind of thriller, a serious kind of um, not necessarily wholly realistic, but at least attempting at realistic, making you feel
Attempting an interpretation of like what an outbreak.
what an outbreak might really be like and how scary it might be.
Yeah.
And also, I knew there'd be a monkey. So I was expecting a lot from that monkey. And it didn't turn out to be that at all.
No, instead it turned out to be ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
it's ridiculous. I think if I had gone into it, if someone had said it's a crazy action thriller, it's just this fun sort of Hollywood big time action helicopter chase kind of movie, at least I would have been better prepped for it and maybe I would have liked it more on that level. But I spent so much of my viewing time just being stunned by how terrible it was.
It's okay, it's really terrible. For let's I think we just have to get into what makes it like so bad.
Yes.
Like because it does start with this kind of serious like working people in the government dealing with diseases like oh, you know. And then it goes absurd. Like the entire outbreak ends up being located to just one small rural town.
Mm-hmm.
Like there it's full of all of these like neat and tidy endings when the whole point of something like this is that there is no like neat and tidy. It's like every thread is perfectly picked up at the end. They
Mm-hmm.
find the original source, they figure out every mystery. The contagion ends up only being located to one small rural town, so it's entirely contained, it's solvable. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's incredibly unrealistic. And so many things that I think maybe I would not have realized are unrealistic really jumped out. I mean, there's the stuff that's clearly just plot holes and silliness, like the they the disease originates in Africa, and I think in Zaire, and
Yes.
it comes to the United States, and immediately the investigators know that there's an animal vector that they need to find.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you're like, how did you? What makes you think that? Like, on what basis do you conclude that an animal vector had to be involved? They just somehow know that, and I feel like I wouldn't have missed that plot hole at any time. But then there were other things like the people in the town. There's this one little Northern California town. It was
Yes.
like in the middle of the woods that is infected, and they quarantine it, and then the people try to escape the quarantine. They get all fed up and they sort of try to drive through the military.
With their prepper like
Yeah,
trucks and guns. They're like the rednecks
yeah,
trying to like get away from the military.
and like Koch funded Tea Party protesters in Michigan notwithstanding. I think we've seen how when a town is actually quarantined, as they have been, like here in New Rochelle, I think it was New Rochelle, right? Um, they shut down that entire town, and people comply. They
Yeah.
comply with that because that's scary shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're going to listen to you and they're going to be and there was also this like it was so hacky. I think that was the thing that was so like
It's a very hacky movie.
absurd about it. It was such a fucking hacky movie. Like there's a moment where a woman in the town. Well, first of all, if we're going to go to unrealistic things, the fact that the disease goes to becoming airborne, like it mutates
In
within 24
24 hours.
hours.
Yeah.
Like, come on, guys. That's
Yeah,
ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
it wasn't airborne and then it is immediately. So now you have two viruses essentially.
And
Um,
there's like this weird hacky thing where like this woman is sick, this mother of two daughters is sick, and the rest of her family isn't. And the government comes to the house and takes her away and shears her hair and makes her go into the showers. No, I'm sorry, that's a Holocaust movie. But it was like that. It was exactly
they,
like that. It was like it was
yeah,
shot like Schindler's List. It
yeah.
was ridiculous.
Yeah, but pretty much. They really do evoke that kind of like Holocaust implication with this like ultra militarized occupation of the town and certain people being taken away with their things. It's hard to miss. It seems like they had to be doing
Yeah.
that on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the the ultimate hacky thing is the monkey that they're trying to track down because
The
it has
monkey.
the antibodies.
Right.
So important. Is like hanging out in the woods in Marin, and this little girl makes friends with it, and
Yeah, he comes and visits her window at night and
and
he'll only come out for
he'll only
her.
come out for the little girl.
This little blonde girl.
Yeah, of course. So it's just as corny and formulaic a Hollywood movie as you could possibly come up with. It has the love story with the main character played by Dustin Hoffman. He's divorced from Rene Russo, and so it's only a matter of time before they realize they still want to be together. And you have a corny love story. It,
You have the like bad military guy. And so,
oh
like,
yeah,
all of a sudden, Dustin Hoffman and Cuba Gooding Jr., who are supposed to be these like medical scientists or like action heroes who are like jumping from helicopters onto boats and like taking over TV station. Like, it's ridiculous.
yeah. Ridiculous is the only word for it,
Yeah.
um, and kind of in some places nonsensical. Like they want to bomb the town. Which okay, there's another thing that I now know to be unrealistic. Not that I wouldn't put it past our government to bomb a town if it had some reason to, but this belief that the government and the military are so brutally efficient, cruelly
Yeah.
efficient at stopping an outbreak. That's more fantastical than anything else in the movie.
That the president would be like, is the outbreak limited to this one town? Just wipe it out.
Just wipe it out.
Just
Yeah,
just bomb the
because
town.
you have to stop it from getting out beyond there. Like
Yeah.
just the president who really cares about stopping the outbreak and they're willing to stop at nothing to prevent it from spreading. But then also, Dustin Hoffman's character wants to find the monkey vector because he believes that it has the antibodies and they can use that to create an antibody serum,
Which they do instantly.
which they do
Like they
instantly.
find the monkey. First
And
of all,
an hour
they
later,
find the
they have the
fucking
thing. Yeah.
monkey, and an hour later they have it. And Rene Russo, who's gotten infected, all of a sudden, like
Right?
she goes from being
On
like
death's
having the
door.
bubonic
Yeah.
plague to being like dewy skinned and 10 years younger and like Vaseline on the lens from like an antibiotic serum they make in 10 minutes from a monkey that somehow magically, after being in the woods of Marin, actually just really wants to hang out with this one
Right.
human little
And
blonde
hasn't
girl.
infected anybody else.
No,
And
has not.
also, yeah, we'll talk about this maybe more when we talk about the major themes that we're seeing. But yeah, it's only in this one town. So, yeah, they want to stop Dustin Hoffman. Donald Sutherland wants to stop Dustin Hoffman from finding the monkey. It's not just that he's ignoring the attempts to find the monkey and doesn't believe they'll work and is proceeding with his plan to kill everyone in the town, but he's actively trying to stop Dustin Hoffman from pursuing the alternate, less balmy solution.
Yeah, he's like, you know what? We're just gonna bomb the shit out of this place. Like, just let's
It's
just
not
bomb it. Let's
clear.
just be done.
Yeah, it's not clear why he's
Well, no,
so
but
gung ho
then,
on that.
but this is really important because that's the other thing that's bullshit. So the movie starts like 20 years prior
Hmm.
in Africa.
Zaire.
It's really Vietnam.
Yeah,
Like,
it is
it's,
right.
it,
If the title didn't say whatever Zaire, whatever it was, you'd read it as Vietnam because it looks like honestly, I think they recycled a set from either a Vietnam movie or maybe a TV show.
absolutely. That's exactly what they did. It's like jungly
Yeah,
somewhat.
there's
And
huts.
you're supposed to feel like, oh, the American military intervened and did this atrocity. and now it's being revisited 20 years later, and Donald Sutherland is trying to cover it up by like not letting Dustin Hoffman find the monkey. Like that's the kind of
I can't. It's
convoluted logic,
it's
which is like
entirely
makes no,
unclear how the murder of
yeah.
the town aids in that cover up or whatever. But okay,
And yeah, but it's also this thing where you're like, the US commits atrocities all the time, nobody finds out, it's fine.
right.
Like
Like they're
I
trying so hard. It just seems to me that if you bomb a whole town in Northern California, that's going to call more attention to the issue than anything, right? Your cover up's been
yeah,
going pretty well.
but
If no
it's
one's really onto you, just let
again
it be.
unclear. Now, how was it? I don't know how this was for you,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a very odd experience for me. Like, we'll get to the themes of like government, all these things. We're going to get to that in a second, but just about Outbreak,
Mm-hmm.
to watch Kevin Spacey and Dustin Hoffman, who were recently sort of outed by the Me Too movement, and to see
Oh,
them
yeah.
in their most kind of smug, like king of the world performance selves is very odd. It was a little odd
It
for
was a
me.
little off putting. I didn't mind it as much with Kevin Spacey because it was an earlier performance and it was before he was the king of the world. He
Right.
he was just an up and coming actor who wasn't sure yet whether he could abuse people with impunity or whether he'd really have to try to hide it. And you could
Right.
kind of you could see that, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you could see that he was the lack of sureness in his eyes, the uncertainty in his eyes.
That's right.
Went
That's
well
right.
with the
Except when he
character,
got to have the good dying,
right? The
chewing
wholesome
effect.
death, yeah.
Wholesome death.
All right, we have to talk about Contagion. So let's
Okay.
move forward.
So,
Contagion is the movie that I sort of thought Outbreak would be.
and I watched Contagion waiting for it to become Outbreak. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
there's this moment very early where they're like, they finally located the virus and they're looking at it. They're like, I see some DNA from pig and DNA from bat. And I immediately was ready for like cut to top of mountain, evil
Right.
genius splicing
Yeah,
pig
yeah,
and bat together. Like
yeah, yeah.
I was waiting for a solid hour in that movie, waiting for the sort of,
The
like
other shoe to
the
drop.
tablecloth to be
Yeah.
like, I was like waiting the whole time. And then I was like, no, this is just a very kind of like sober, procedural, speculative film about like, what would this look like? And so much of it was so familiar. I mean, this
Mm-hmm.
came out in 2011,
Yeah.
and it's like they're talking about social distancing and don't touch your face, and the body's being buried in plastic. It is, and they're setting up the hospitals and like the Javits Center. It's like
Yeah.
it's exactly what's happening now, and it's like sober and measured, and we get to know this whole ensemble of characters, but never too well, because they're all doing fulfilling their own purpose and sort of doing their jobs.
Right. It's
and
not
and you
following a single heroic
heroic
protagonist who's gonna.
lead.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's so bizarre to watch a movie where you're waiting for it to turn into something else, and it just keeps being what it is. And then I went and was like, who directed this? And it's Steven Soderbergh. I was like, no wonder it's so good. Like it's actually this very kind of thoughtful, speculative movie where they're doing the magic if, like, what if this contagion breaks out in the United States? And the sort of conclusions they come to are based on the given circumstances of what would happen. So they're saying
Yeah.
like, oh, like we would want to make a vaccine. Once we make a vaccine, it takes a while to make enough vaccine for like everybody. So maybe there would be a lottery system to decide who gets the vaccine. Like
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
it, all of the speculation was based very deeply on fact, which was very interesting.
Yeah. It was clear that the screenwriters had closely consulted with actual contagious disease experts, and the way you know that is that a lot of the stuff a lot of the exposition they're giving you via the characters in the movie is stuff I've learned over the past month from
That's
listening to
right.
contagious
That's
disease
right.
experts on NPR and reading articles. It's like there's a whole scene where I think it's Kate Winslet is explaining the R naught which is
Yes.
the rating of how contagious something is. I was like, I
Yes.
already know this stuff.
Totally. Totally. One thing I found particularly delightful, because
Mhm.
as some of you longtime listeners may know, I'm not a fan of Gwyneth Paltrow. And she is in the opening scene and she's dead within 10 minutes. It's
Yeah,
fabulous.
barely
And
even a
then they
spoiler because it's the
like
first thing that happens in the
carve
movie.
open her head.
I know.
Oh, it's just
You kept
delightful.
telling me to watch it, like watch Contagion, watch Contagion. So I finally watched it, and I texted Maya 10 minutes in, like, I know why you like this movie so much. Gwyneth Paltrow dies in 10 minutes. But it is that's a great way for the movie to signal to you what it's gonna do.
And
It's
what it's not going to do. Like,
yeah,
yeah, our biggest movie stars that we have in this, we kill them no matter like we don't
yeah,
keep them alive so you can see them any longer. If the virus gets them, oh well, this is how the shit works. Like
yeah.
it does not care
It's gonna kill
whether you're
some
Gwyneth
people.
Paltrow
Yeah,
or like, yeah, it
and it's
doesn't
not
care.
dramatic. It's not a build up to a dramatic death where she sacrifices herself or some shit to save somebody. It's
No,
just she dies and gets
because she caught
her
it.
head cut open because she caught it. And
That's
she's
it.
the patient zero, right?
She's the patient zero. And I think what's also interesting is that there's a moment Lawrence Fishburne is in it and he's kind of the head CDC guy.
Hmm.
And there's this wonderful moment which again, it's not like big bad evil government. It's like this is how this actually works where at one point he calls his wife
Hmm.
and is like get out of town, get to Atlanta. Like
Hmm.
come here right now cuz it's about to take over and he's afraid for her.
Yeah.
And he's like don't tell anyone. And then she calls a friend of hers. And then he's kind of publicly scolded for using his inside knowledge for
Hmm.
personal purposes. And you're like, yeah, that's actually a speculation that is. And so,
Yeah.
even though they keep him working because he's very good at his job, he has to be sort of publicly reprimanded and not allowed on the press conferences anymore. And it's these delicate political
Yeah.
sort of dances that are happening all the time right now and we're
Yeah.
watching them happen.
Yeah. So it is why everyone's talking about that movie right now because it feels weirdly prescient. But that's just because I think it was based on research with the
Yeah,
CDC and other agencies or
it's
experts.
limited in its melodrama, and I think where it falls down is when it goes to melodrama. Like the few moments where it sort of like surrenders to melodrama, where I guess at some point the screenwriter or maybe Soderbergh were like, all right, we got to give the audience something. And it's like those were the moments that were the least satisfying to me. I'm like, don't
Yeah.
don't worry about me. This is plenty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and then
procedural is the interesting part.
it's absolutely, and then the final moment of that
Hmm.
of the movie and the sort of big reveal that we've been building to the entire time is that the reason that the bat DNA and the pig DNA sort of encountered each other is because of habitat destruction
Hmm.
that's leading to climate change by a multinational corporation. It's like they save that beat to the
Hmm.
it's the final moment of the film. It's brilliant.
That's
That's brilliant.
great. And it's such a great contrast to Outbreak.
Well, weren't you expecting? You were telling me that, like with
Yeah.
Outbreak, you were thought, oh, this is going to be a climate change movie. It's like,
Yeah. So I went into Outbreak really looking for what they were going to identify as the source of the disease. Was it going to be Africa, monkeys? Like who or what is going to be the scary disease causing agency, the thing that causes you to get sick? And it turned out the villain in the movie really is the military and the government, mostly the military, which is an interesting thing in and of itself. It wasn't the movie in a lot of ways wasn't even really about disease. It was about
no,
something else. There's
yes,
a moment, yeah, what you're referring to is there's a moment early on when Dustin Hoffman and his team are in the African village where this disease has resurfaced for the first time since the 60s. And they're talking to the physician of the village, I guess, and he explains that it, their patient zero, the person who spread it first seems to have gotten it from tainted well water. It seems to have come from the village's well, or something like that. I don't remember the exact details. He had gone on a journey into the jungle and come back, and then the well became tainted. And I fully was like, oh, okay. Well, this is going to be an environmental thing. It's going to be some kind of like pollution thing or climate
No,
change.
it
No,
is it
no.
is virus as biological weapon.
Yeah, but not an outbreak. It's not a biological weapon.
That's no, that's ends up being why Donald Sutherland like wants to
Oh,
keep it hush
because
hush.
they
Like,
yeah, like aliens thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
they want
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
they want to keep the
That's
source to use it when they want to deploy it.
right, right. But then, okay, I'm not going to get into the plot structure problems in that movie. What I'd rather do is praise Contagion for that fantastic ending beat, particularly because, in a way, it's much more powerful than forefronting for the entire movie. Like, this is
Yes,
corporate greed causing climate change, and this is the consequence of it. It's much more like it feels like it's just a natural disaster. It's just this thing that happened that
right.
where there's like a little bit of globalism as a fear in there
Yes,
because Gwyneth Paltrow's
yes,
character gets it on a trip to Hong Kong and Macau, and so there's a
right.
little bit of that. But then ultimately, after you've been through this whole experience and realized the potential consequences of this pandemic occurring, then you're hit with,
And
and
this
this
is
is
where it's
why.
from.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah, it's good stuff.
it is good stuff.
So finally, we have to talk about Quarantine, which was
Okay,
chosen for this list primarily because it has a one-word title.
a one-word title, and also because we're all quarantining right now. I mean,
Exactly.
so quarantine, guys, is Outbreak meets Blair Witch Project.
And that's
that's
you really need say no
that's
more.
that's all it is. It's like a found footage movie. It's pretty bad. It's about like a young local
Whoops,
news reporter. Oh,
my bad.
young local news reporter goes to the firehouse to like hang out with firemen all night to do like a little feature story about like what it's like to be a fireman. And luckily they get called out on something, which is very exciting for her and her cameraman, because the last thing you want is to just be stuck there with guys shooting hoops all night. And it turns out that, and they end up in this building where this woman is essentially like, this old woman like has rabies,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden it turns out that it's uh, a disease that is spreading. The CDC just kind of magically shows up
Hmm.
after 5 minutes, which is, that's, we're going to get to that. Like, the CDC has these like epic FBI like powers in all of the, it's really something. So, like 5 minutes after the fire department gets there and they see that this woman has this contagious rabies like thing, the CDC shows up, shuts the entire apartment building down, and everybody is stuck there in quarantine while more and more people get sick and infected. And it has the
Hmm.
Blair Witch ending where our hero, our
The
newscaster, is like,
protagonist.
says the last thing, our protagonist like says the last thing to the camera, and then the camera like, because she's been killed by a zombie. It's essentially a zombie movie.
Yes. And what we found when, what I found when researching, I was looking for movies that are about disease, about pandemics, contagion, disease outbreaks, all that stuff. And I found as many as I could, but you have to put a limit somewhere because it's like, well, are vampire movies about contagion? Like,
Yes,
they
of course they
are,
totally
but you can't
are.
include
Yeah.
every vampire and zombie movie. And it's like, okay. But within reason, I tried to collect a list of most of the movies that involve an explicit talking about disease. People, it
Hmm.
is an infection, it's not just metaphorically an infection or something like that.
Okay.
And I put them into categories because I am only nominally a post structuralist. I like to pretend at being a post structuralist a lot of the time, but sometimes I just love a good categorization. And what I found is that most of them fit into the category of like horror movies, horror zombie movies of some kind. Now, within that, there are obviously subcategories because you do have your zombie type ones, and then there's like body horror, and there's the kind of like possession, body snatcher kind of ones. There's different
Right.
subgenres there. But most of the movies that address contagious disease that I could find are horror movies, are like kind of low budget
Yeah.
and just straight up horror movies. The other category that had the second most entries would be medical thrillers.
Mm,
So I would put Outbreak and Contagion in that category, even though they're very different movies. And I would say that
right.
within that category, you also have some subcategories where Outbreak is this action movie, and
Right.
Contagion is more of the procedural, investigative kind of serious movie,
Yes.
which there are also a few of. There's actually not that many that you would call like big action movies about disease. But anyway, back to
So
quarantine.
back to quarantine. So what's interesting, and this I think brings us to one of the things that we want to talk about, which are like the bigger themes
Yes.
that we're seeing again and again in these movies. And there's something really interesting about that is that in quarantine, what ends up happening is 5 minutes after they realize that this old woman is like rabid and
Mm-hmm.
infected, the CDC again like shows up and
Yes.
locks down the house. And when people try to escape so that they don't get bitten by the zombies, they get shot at by the government.
Which is sort of preposterous if you think about it, because it's pretty evident who's been infected and who hasn't.
Yes.
It's not like
No,
there's
they
a
they're literally
prolonged
like they
period of,
have rabies.
yeah.
Like they instantly get rabies and foam at the mouth.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
It would even actually probably have been a better movie if they had said, well, there's this like period of time where this
So
virus
you don't
incubates.
know.
Yeah,
That's right.
where you're non-symptomatic and you don't even know if you have it or not, or maybe you could have it but try to escape anyway and no one else would know you had it. But no, it's just pretty straightforward who has it and who doesn't, and yet they feel the need to quarantine this building and just
Right. So you
let
feel
everybody die.
that's right. So you feel like so you're being trapped by big government. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, that's one of the themes that I saw in all three of these movies. And I think what our hope is that by starting with these three one-word pandemic movies, we're going to find the themes that we're going to revisit. And I feel
Yeah.
like the theme of government and military power is huge in
Yeah, it's
all of
huge.
these. It's like, and it's
It's always
huge
there.
and it's complicated because on the one hand, the doctors are who saves us.
Mhm.
They are really the heroes. And it made me realize when we were talking earlier, like one of the things that's so strange about the right wing is that like they love the military, but they hate the government. And you're like, but don't don't you see how those things like go kind of are the
Yeah.
same?
Not only are they the same, but that the military is the government's potential
Tool.
tool
Yeah,
for
that's what they're
enforcing
there.
its power over you, which is
Power,
the thing you don't like about the government. But
and yet
I
you
think, well,
support the military.
right, but now that I think about that, it's really the police that are doing that in any direct way in people's lives. The military are enforcing the government's power on other people.
Other people.
So that's good. That's okay. You can support
That's
that.
okay. So, but then that's what's so scary about these movies. All of a sudden, the military is
Right.
enforcing its power on
On
us,
us.
and we don't like that.
Right, right, right.
Like, it's like
And
we don't.
disease, yeah, disease becomes the mechanism, the trigger that
Right.
uh, creates that situation that allows that to happen. So it's not even the disease itself that's the problem. Like especially in outbreak, it's it's not even like the obviously the disease is MacGuffin.
Right.
The monkey's the MacGuffin. That fucking monkey. I just, oh, Maya, I
You're
couldn't.
obsessed with
I
that
am
monkey.
obsessed with the monkey.
You are obsessed with that
Let's
monkey.
just
But
take a
there
moment for the monkey, and then we're gonna continue talking about the government and the CDC. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So the monkey in Outbreak, I remember it from the ads for the movie, and I assumed that it would have a large role. I thought that was clear. The first shot of the movie is a close up of the monkey, close up of
Right.
a monkey
Right.
screaming. So I'm like,
Right.
I'm monkey screaming like in my notes, and it makes sense because it's 1995. So we've
Yeah.
all just sort of become aware that AIDS probably originated with
Right.
a chimp or other ape or monkey, and somebody getting bit by one or eating one or something like that.
And 95, maybe the cocktail has just appeared, so we're really at the end of the sort of holocaust
Yeah, where
of
yeah,
of AIDS.
it's still a thing, and we're all kind of just sort of reeling from the last 10 years and what's happened. But I think that there's a very clear association between a monkey and disease. So that's what I'm expecting. And I'm wondering how that's going to figure in, and how they're going to use the monkey to imply the origination of infection.
Right.
And they don't. The monkey actually turns out to be the good guy in a lot of ways. The monkey saves the day in reality. So, and it's the military that are bad.
Yeah.
Not even the whole military, because as you pointed out, Dustin Hoffman is
And
himself
Cuba
working
Gooding
for the
Jr.
military, and they're the heroes.
Cuba
And
Gooding Jr., scientist slash helicopter stunt pilot.
virtuoso helicopter pilot, yeah, and
I
also
mean, I haven't done this for years, but okay.
and then he's out flying the best helicopter pilot they have, and also they're
Absolutely.
in helicopters. It's a helicopter
It's just,
chase.
okay. Okay. This is this is the moment where Rebecca said something when we were like planning, which I think is so
What?
true
Oh,
about how like
the thing about the player, right?
yes.
The Outbreak feels like it's a movie from within the movie The Player, which if you haven't seen, it's Robert Altman classic, right? And
Oh,
it's
it's
about
so good.
Hollywood. Tim Robbins plays this Hollywood executive who's like kind of slowly going crazy, as he's maybe getting blackmailed, and it's all against this backdrop of Hollywood and Hollywood
Of
studios.
Hollywood's absurdity.
The absurdity, exactly. And they're making this movie, and there's this whole conversation ongoing throughout the movie about making a good film that's not based on, audience scores, test audiences opinions, but it's just an artist's vision and so forth. And then well, no spoilers, y'all will see it if you haven't seen it, because that one's really good. But there are movies within the movie, of course, that are parodies of Hollywood movies. And this could have been one of them.
Absolutely.
100%. You have these distinguished actors, really great actors, just playing these dopey parts, saying these stupid, god awful things with utmost seriousness and conviction. And
Yeah.
it's so corny and over the top in the plot and situation and the conflict that they've set up. The dialogue is so cliched. It feels like a parody of
Yeah.
what Robert Altman thinks a Hollywood movie is like.
Yeah. And it is.
And
It
it is.
is.
So back to
Um
the monkey.
back
Uh,
to the monkey.
so I was really through most of the movie. I wasn't sure like what our relationship with this monkey is, and whether we're afraid of it. Is it a bad thing? Is it a dangerous thing? And I guess in the end, the monkey is just sort of like nature. It's this innocent that has no. What is your hand gestures, Maya?
Nature.
Nature. Okay.
Ooh, it's like
Ooh.
nature. Like
Yeah.
ooh.
But it's innocent of all this. It doesn't know
Yes.
what diseases it carries or what antibodies. It just
Yes.
wants to make friends with a little blonde girl. And it's crucial to solving the mystery and saving everybody. I I was really surprised by that because it just seems like such a prime opportunity for the monkey to represent whatever you want to villainize.
Right.
Except, I guess, the military. You can't
But what's
really
more
represent the
important
military
is
that
like
way.
Donald Sutherland being like using it as a biological weapon. And that happens in Quarantine as well, where like the
Hmm.
discovery that they make right before the cameraman and the reporter, like right before
Right.
they're pulled to death by rabid, whatever, infected people, they discover that like some doomsday cult
Hmm.
that's hanging out in the attic of this building, some doomsday cult has stolen this virus from a chemical weapons laboratory. And like
Right.
that is what's caused all of this. And that was the moment that I was expecting. It's almost like in its absence, it's there. The fact that it's absent from Contagion actually puts it there because that's what I was expecting. Like this idea of the virus as not as something that man is trying to put its hands on and
Hmm.
control and deploy to its own ends. And like
Yes.
that's where it all goes wrong. Like I feel like
Yeah.
that's absolutely there.
Yeah. I Is it in Contagion? You think by its absence it's there?
It was in my head. So then
Okay.
yes, it's
Okay.
just there.
That's fine. That's fine. I think the government is portrayed as very competent in Contagion. It's
The
on
CDC
top.
is, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's the government. But it's the CDC is so on top, and the WHO. They're just
Yes,
like working together. They know their shit. They are. There is like one death, and they are there. They are quarantining Matt Damon. They
totally.
now they can't control it, and we understand why because it spreads so fast, and they. But you watch them tracing. They trace Gwyneth Paltrow's steps to try to figure out where she contracted it and who she may have given it to, and they're just really on their game.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
so uber competent, and the CDC in Outbreak are also, well, it's really Dustin Hoffman who's on top of everything. And there's a really kind of funny line where after they visit the village in Africa and first encounter the disease, and then they get back to the States, and Dustin Hoffman's like, "It's gonna come here to the States," and people are like, "Well, how do you know?" I just know
I
it.
just feel
He
it.
just
I
knows it.
feel it.
There's
Yeah.
no research or evidence behind this opinion. There's no explanation of the means by which diseases spread that would justify his fear. He has an instinct for it. It's
He
like
has a real
he's
feeling for it.
Maverick. He
Yeah.
he has
Yes.
he's just
Yes.
damn good at it.
There was like,
He doesn't
oh
have to
God.
try.
You know what the scene is that really like just where I was like, oh, it just pissed me off was the scene where they're trying to divert him from this outbreak by sending him to another like bullshit little outbreak.
Yeah.
And he like gets the guy to send the helicopter to another place and he's like,
Yeah.
it'll be your ass. It's like, oh, the
It
schmacting,
it
schmacting.
it
It's like the
was
worst.
terrible.
But
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 the CDC in it are they're just like nice. They're the ones who believe him
yeah,
and help him.
they're nice, they're competent, they're scientists, but there's still, I don't know, there's still this like weird tension between the CDC and the scientists as these experts and the fear of militarization.
Mhm.
That's the thing that it's like there's this like militarization is this horrible creepy thing in
Mhm.
all of these movies where all of a sudden it's like giant tanks are deployed. There are these
Yeah.
vehicles that shouldn't be there. There are rules being put in place. Like,
Yeah,
ah,
and
this is
people are
not,
getting trapped. Yeah. I mean, that's what the movie in Outbreak, what is trying to convey when it has the citizens of the little town trying to ram their way past the military
Right.
vehicles and out of the quarantine, it's that they feel trapped. And of course, quarantine is all about that. The horror in that movie, beyond the rabid zombie people being scary, is that you're trapped in there with them. You can't run away. And
And the very people who are supposed to be helping you
oh, yeah,
are the ones who are like
yeah,
trapping you.
exactly. They're trapping you in there, and they don't put any value on your individual life or existence. That
That's right.
the fear in both of those cases seems to center around the idea that the disease is scary, but what's really scary is how it changes the dynamic between you and those in power. And
Well, yeah, you just become a number.
yeah,
You just become like a vector of infection. And so your life loses meaning.
yeah, yes, that's kind of a common theme that we're seeing.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we should definitely get into some of the other big themes that we've noticed and how they play out in
So
these particular films.
one thing that I notice in all of these films is the need to make visible the spread of this invisible thing.
Yes.
Now, quarantine is the most sort of boring. It's like they are rabid and foaming at the mouth. Done. Like we see it. It might as well be a
Yeah.
zombie movie where their like jaw falls off and you're
Okay.
like,
But
it's like,
I want to pause there though,
okay.
because there are so many of these types of movies where the disease turns the people into zombies or makes them violent in some way and then they attack you. And I find that really interesting. And I think that, yes, it is a way of taking this invisible fear and making it visible. How do you fear a microscopic virus? It's it could be anywhere, and that in itself, I think we at least now know is truly scary. But in these horror movies, they externalize it on, and
Yes.
so instead of being afraid that I'm going to catch something, I'm actually afraid of this monster that's right
Yes.
there. And I just want to mention this because it is such a common
Trope.
motif trope
Yeah.
that it makes the people around you be the threat in a way that in the case of disease they are, and that there's a really interesting fear there. It's less the fear of becoming infected and more the fear of the people that are around you, the people that you trust and are vulnerable to, becoming dangerous to you.
Including the government.
Yes,
Then
well,
there's,
always the government,
well,
right?
always the government. Like that's the sort of weird, I guess the reason it sticks with me is because we've talked so much about like right-wing movements.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of those places where the extreme right wing and the extreme left wing kind of, it's like
Yeah.
they they flip around the bend and they meet. They're like
Mm-hmm.
really close to each other. Um, but I feel like with both Outbreak and Contagion, you see something very different where they're trying to, or at least at moments,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to show you, like I remember with the Gwyneth Paltrow scene, and I know that I'm more sensitive to it because we're in this moment.
Yes,
The opening scene is her talking to her lover, who's not her husband,
but we don't know
in
that
an
yet.
airport. We don't know that yet.
But also,
But
she's like sweating and
a little
glistening.
bit, and she coughs a little bit, and then she like puts her hand in a tray of peanuts, and like
Mm-hmm.
and like the camera just kind of lingers on her hand doing that. And in this moment, I think both my husband and I were like, oh
Yeah,
god, she's
yeah.
touching the peanuts. Like it's
And then,
and
go
it's
ahead.
trying to, so that's what it's looking for. It's looking for those moments of transmission by focusing on these
Absolutely.
moments of human contact. And that was really like that's
Well, the
and
scene
that's what it's
immediately.
visually.
Sorry.
No, no, no. So that's what it's trying to do visually. It's
Yes.
not turning it into a zombie who's going to come get me. It's like, oh my
Right.
god, she touched the peanuts.
And the next scene after that, I think, is a Japanese guy on a train, and you see him holding the bar, standing in the train, and he leaves, and the camera lingers on where his hand was, and
Yep,
each thing that he touches. And absolutely, now that this is something that's in the forefront of our minds, that's really resonant. But it's so
absolutely.
well realized that the you can't see the actual virus, but you can see those places where the infected person has been, and you know where the contamination is, and that they're so mundane. They're just everyday
Yes.
objects, places, and things that they've
But then
touched.
when they're in you're aware of the crowdedness of it.
Yes,
He's on like
yeah.
a crowded train, and that's what
Oh,
makes it so like,
okay. So we have to talk about that in a second. We've gone for an hour, so we have to wrap up.
oh my god.
But
Okay,
I
okay.
just want to mention that in my favorite of these three, obviously, Outbreak, um, they try to make the visual, they try to make the invisible visual by there's a scene in the movie theater where an infected guy is coughing, and you sort of follow the particle of cough. The
Yeah,
camera follows it as it goes into the crowded movie theater.
right. But then
It's a
also
very
there's a moment
clumsy attempt
the
at
but the
literally making it
I
visual.
thought the best moment though is when the Dustin Hoffman character realizes it's gone airborne, and all of a sudden you see his eye sort of like, it's like he's tracing it with his eye, and it
Right,
goes
right,
up into the
right.
vent, and you're like, okay, we
Yes.
get. So that was that.
I actually
But
did like
in
that moment.
I it was a great moment. But those are the moments where you see them trying to anchor this scary thing into something that you can see.
Yes.
And I feel like that's the big challenge of this kind of storytelling. And I feel
Yes.
like that I feel like I feel like the government, I feel like uh the the fear of the other,
Yeah.
all of these
Fear of the
things are
other.
things that we're going to be seeing again and again and again.
And in relation to the crowds, the crowded movie theater and the crowded train, urbanness, city life has, for so long been associated with disease spread, and not necessarily justifiably. In the cases where it has been associated, it's often because, like immigrants in cities were had to live in very close conditions and not with great hygiene. So it, it's a
Well, and
it's a long
so
history of that.
two things. One, since we're wrapping up, if you guys go to my Instagram feed, I have not been posting pictures of myself in cute outfits. I've been posting pictures of images from the plague archive.
Mm-hmm.
And I found ads for Formamint, which is a mint that's supposed to kill all the bacteria.
Right.
And the woman popping it's always like some damsel in a
Yes,
horrible city popping a Formamint tablet so that she's not
I love
infected
it.
by this mass of male
Yeah,
dirt.
I love it. And that's it's such a big theme in early cinema, like silent cinema. The the innocent young girl coming into this urban space, and how threatening it is, how dangerous it is, the peril of
Yeah.
crime and disease and.
But also in terms of the immigrant. So I did a project, this is years back, about it was called Nostalgia for the Mud, Nostalgia de la Boue. And
Mhm.
it's about the ways that sometimes as a Jew, as a model minority, I feel a little nostalgic for when we were like syphilitic, evil, like
Mhm.
disease carriers. And I was looking, so I've been looking at like model minorities and looking at the way that 100 years ago we were not considered model minorities. And both the Jew and the Chinese were associated with rats.
Yeah.
Like there were pictures of Chinese on rat poison packaging.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And so
I
there's a
believe
way
it.
that the relation to disease, and Jews were associated in late 19th century Europe with syphilis and they were all Jews and rats were associated, Chinese and rats were associated, obviously because of the living quarters that they were in. They
Mm-hmm.
were more likely to have to suffer the pest of that. But then rats are connected to the plague. And so like these things are all sort of braided into what we think of as like the urban danger of
Yeah.
disease.
And the othering of disease.
Yes. And I think we're going to see that again as we take deeper dives.
Agreed. Okay, let's wrap up.
All right, friends.
I
Well, if you want to email us with your thoughts about plague movies or TV shows that you would like us to watch and
oh, please
ruin as
do.
we take these deeper dives, email us saucepodcast@gmail.com. Find us on the Twitter, on the Insta, on the Facebook at Sauce Podcast. And please go to our Patreon and support us as we continue to figure out exciting ways to get awesome stuff to your brain. Uh,
Patreon.com/sauce podcast. There are many
yes.
membership levels you can check out. Thank you to all our current and continuing patrons. And
Yes.
we have bonus material to share with patrons. So think about joining that. Also, you can reach me directly. I am at GynoStar on all the social medias. You can see my outfits on Instagram and read my quips on Twitter, the whole lot of it.
And you can find me at Maya Garance anywhere you are looking for Maya Garances.
I think we are going to try to do this live stream thing every Monday. Are we cool with that? Maybe?
Every Monday,
Okay. And
and
then we
then
can
we will
post the
post
audio
the.
maybe
Mhm.
Wednesday or Thursday. So we could get into a
Yes,
regular
indeed.
routine. We want to get into a regular schedule. We will record episodes live. You can participate, ask questions. We only had one participant in the live chat this evening, Dom, who wrote Dream Achieved,
Wow.
by which I assume he means that watching us
Getting to
drink
be with us
is a
live.
dream.
It is. It's a dream come
It's
true.
a dream to have you, Dom. And so watch out for that. And we'll
And
have
we will
another.
see you next week.
We will have more contagion type stuff to talk about because boy, we're barely scratching the
Yeah.
surface. We have a lot
Oh
to
my
get into.
God. We
All
didn't
right.
even get to everything we wanted to talk about today.
I know
God.
because we talked too
Oh,
much.
all
All
right.
right. Adios, amoebas.